Is Teachers Talk Radio, and you are listening live.
Hello, good afternoon, and welcome to the drive home. It is the 21st of July, and I know for a lot of you guys, it is the last day of term. So if you are listening on your way home, thank you very much, and welcome to the summer holidays. Out here in Spain, we're almost up to the first month of our holidays. We started on the 22nd of June. So welcome to the summer. I hope you've got some wonderful plans lined up. We've certainly got a wonderful show lined up for you today. We're going to be speaking to an absolute legend, somebody I'm a huge fan of, Simon Perlman. I'll give him a brief introduction very shortly. But before that, as I'm an English teacher, as I love words, I thought what I'd do every week, I'd throw out a different word so we can think about it. This week, the word is scuba. I was in a Facebook group earlier this week asking what people wanted to do when they were children. And somebody popped up saying they wanted to be a scuba diver. Now, this is something that I'm a huge fan of. I love scuba diving. And it's something that popped up when I was teaching a live class for Pearson and the BBC earlier in the year. And the word scuba came up. And a lot of people, they knew the word scuba, but not a lot of people knew where it came from. So I can see there's a lot of tension building here with people saying, what does it mean? But what does it mean? It's that scuba is actually an acronym, and it stands for Self-Contained Underwater Breathing Apparatus. Oh my gosh, I can see you all, your minds are blown. You're there, you're on your way home, ready to start your summer holidays, thinking, do you know what? I might go scuba diving this weekend. I've got my paddy, so I'm going to go and do that. And you're like, wow, self-contained underwater breathing apparatus. I never knew that, but thankfully I do now. So I am going to start introducing Simon, who I know is on his way here at this very moment. I have sent him his invitation, and he is on his way here now. So I'm going to introduce him. Simon is somebody who's very special to me, very important to me. He started working in English language teaching a while before I did, but it was at the same place I started here in the current city I live in. And I actually went to see him speak at a conference it was a long time ago now. I think it was about 2012. Yeah, it was 2012. I went to see Simon speak at this conference. It's called ATHEA, and it's for the local language schools here in Andalusia. And he was talking about drama with kids in the classroom. Now, drama is something that's it's almost frowned upon here in Spain. It's not seen as being particularly important, so to speak. Now, me being the thespian that I am, I am a huge fan of drama, and Simon's just joining the room now. So yeah, I went to see his session about drama in the classroom, and that was quite inspirational. But what I found most inspirational was just his passion. Now, in that talk, he kind of went off on a tangent, which is something I also tend to do. And he mentioned the idea of English language exams and how perhaps they could be improved. Now, I know a lot of them have been improved a bit since then, but there's still a long way for them to go. But he is here with us now. So thank you for joining us, Simon, and welcome.
Hello, Harry. Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you wonderfully. It's
fantastic.
Lovely to hear your voice, sir.
Good. Well, I'm glad I've been able to connect. And first of all, thanks for having me. Such an honor.
It's a real pleasure.
I heard a little bit of the introduction, and thanks very much. Yes, we are stuck sometimes in exam land. I'm wondering how much that interferes with teaching, how much it improves it. Maybe it focuses us, maybe it doesn't. I think these are issues that we as teachers face across the board, whether it's ELT or mainstream teaching or almost any part of the teaching profession in general, perhaps.
Yeah, exactly. And yeah, I think we kind of get stuck in our own world, don't we? I mean, especially here in Spain, where examining and exams are they are life. All of the reports at the end of the school year is entirely based on exams, and so it's ingrained in parents as well. It's ingrained on students. So when you come in and kind of, I don't know, I'm not going to say rock the boat, but maybe give it a little shake, people get somewhat perturbed and maybe a bit upset by that. So yeah, that was something that it was a really an inspirational moment for me, because the following year I started presenting myself at the same conference, and your colleague T invited me down to Tefel del Sur to do I think that was actually my second ever conference. So it all started with you guys, and you've been with me the whole way, holding my hand and patting me on the back and watching my hair slowly fall out.
I don't know if who's holding whose hand these days, but there we go. I think it's interesting to reflect that I've been involved in ELT for crikey over 20 years now, since 1997, and for sure back then in the day, no one was thinking, or very few people were thinking about exams. We need to remember this is a relatively recent thing. As the CFER levels came into play, and we started talking about B1 and B2 and all these exams and things. The exams were there before, yeah, but we didn't teach. They weren't such an important part of our focus. I was reflecting on this the other day and thinking about space for creativity, space for enjoying things rather than just preparing students for exams. But that's perhaps another story. Yeah,
it definitely is. Yeah.
The development, thinking about speaking at conferences and what have you. Yeah, that's an important part of our development and connecting with people. Maybe we'll talk about that a little more further down the line.
Oh, definitely. One more small point on that whole exam thing. Now, I know that when I've been in Spain for a while now. I've been here for about 11 years, I think, in total now in Spain. And my friends always ask me, I say my friend, back in the UK, they frequently ask, do you speak Spanish fluently? Do you speak Spanish fluently? Whereas here in Spain, the kind of view of English is, what level do you have? Do you have a B1? Do you have a B2? Because I know that if I said to my friends back home, oh, well, I've got a C1 in Spanish, they'd probably look at me like, well, congratulations, I've got a D4 in mechanics. It doesn't really mean a great deal. But that, as you say, is probably a talk for a different day. Now, what I'd like to talk to you about today is, well, it's the evolving role of a teacher, an ELT teacher. So if you would be so kind, I didn't go into it too deeply in your introduction. Would you mind sharing your journey as an ELT teacher so far?
So far, yeah. Only since 1997, which is, crikey, what's that, 24 years? Crikey, makes me
back
feel
when Three Lions was quite new still.
Well, exactly. Yeah, back in the day. Yeah. And I think I came into teaching like so many other people. I'd left university with a degree, thankfully. And I was sort of floating around. I had some sales jobs, some bits and bobs, living in London, wanting to travel, but fearful of living out of a suitcase, and not wanting to be a backpacker and just sort of tick things off. I wanted to live somewhere. So, and I'd always sort of toyed with the idea of teaching. And I think this is how a lot of people move into ELT, that it's a sort of, let's see what happens. So I took a course. Back in those days, there was only a couple of courses available, both of which are going now. And I firmly remember my father saying to me, "Well, that's great, son. You do that, and come back in a year, and then you'll get a proper job." Now, 20 years later, I'm still waiting for that proper job to arrive, loving what I do. And to be honest, I think, for me, working in ELT is a fantastic thing. It's allowed me to live in 4 countries. I've met all sorts of different people. And when I live in those countries, it's about everywhere I've been, I've lived at least for a year and a half. So I've seen the whole cycle of the place, and then moved on or not, as the case may be. I've been lucky. I've always worked in great schools with good development opportunities. It's an interesting question to ponder about whether it's possible to not develop. No matter, we talk about teacher development in a way that about doing new things, about getting new experiences. But I think every time we move into the classroom, to some extent, we have to develop. More on that later, perhaps. But I started my teaching in Istanbul, in Turkey, in a place called the English Centre, which had about 60 teachers across 4 or 5 teachers' rooms, and each teachers' room sort of developed its own ecosystem and sense of support. There's a teacher trainer there who I still remember called Laura Woodward, who I'm still in touch with, and learned so much in that time. It was full of new teachers or people with 1, 2 or 3 years experience. So we're all in a similar sort of space. It was great. Then London, before a short stay in London before hopping to Costa Rica, to a place called the Instituto Británico in San Jose, Costa Rica, which sounds extremely cool, actually.
It definitely does.
Doing at the time. Looking back on it, it was quite a thing. And again, that's where I did my first talk with my partner, Danielle Jones, and our teacher trainer at the time, Tim Groombridge. And we talked about how ELT is different to mainstream teaching, or at that point it was. We need to remember this is about the year 2000. The idea that you don't often, the teacher is the facilitator rather than the formal teacher figure, an idea that I still really hold on to and really enjoy playing with. After that, I moved to London and spent a while in London. Working in London was interesting. It's an extremely badly paid job all over the world, but it felt even more so in London. There was a time when in the Evening Standard, they listed a list of the worst paid jobs in London, and was looking down the list and thinking, well, we earn less than that, and we weren't on the list anywhere. So sort of like, do we exist?
No, we don't exist, Simon. We don't exist.
I'm sure we do, Harry. I'm sure we do.
We're not proper.
And then after that, my love affair with Spain started, where I've been since, crikey, 2001. So 20 years. First in Seville, in a place called the English House with Jennifer Gaudet, where I learned so much about teaching kids. I thought I knew what I was doing when I went to Spain, but I'd never taught kids before. And the difference was just incredible, from teaching adults to teaching children, learning about affect and really caring for our students. And then it was down to Cadiz, where 4 of us set up Active Language, which is a teacher training centre, and then became a language school. And that's kind of cool, actually. Anyone who's started their own business has ideas and ideals about creating your own utopia, which is the reality sets in, and it's not utopia, but we can create what we try to create. Our aim is to do the right thing in the right way for the right reasons. So that was back in 2000 and whatever, 4. And then March came along and COVID, and crikey, at that point there's great fear around, great uncertainty, but we'll be able to continue. What's going to happen? And overnight we all moved a lot of us within the profession, like all teaching professions, all parts of the teaching profession, moved through to online teaching. And it was a time when ELT really came together to really support each other. My colleague Teresa Beswick, was doing how to use Zoom, very basic step-by-step guides, because teachers were thrown into that situation. And that was quite incredible, actually, to see all the support that became available. through this really tough time for everybody. And then obviously as things progressed into hybrid teaching, which you know all about, Harry, of course, and teaching socially distant teaching and teaching behind a mask and all the joys that brings. And at the same time, setting up the TEFL Development Hub, which perhaps we'll talk about a little later on. So yeah, that's sort of my story. Quite a long story. That was what, 20 odd years?
Well, yes, that's 24 years in about 8 minutes, Simon. That's just quite impressive, to be honest. You could set it to a montage with some nice music in the background. You know, Simon evolving through TEFL. Yeah, I really loved quite a lot of the things you said in there, to be honest. Especially the mention of the English house, which is, of course, it's where I met my wife.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Well, there you go. It is. It's where when I came to. So I worked in Cordoba for a year. I got sick in Cordoba, so I had to stay in Spain, but I didn't want to stay in Cordoba, so I came to Seville. Jennifer gave me a job. Luckily, probably not anything to do with my incredible teaching prowess, or maybe it was just because she knew my mum and dad's boss at the time, who said, "You should give him a chance. He's actually all right." But yeah, so I got that job there. I met my wife, and I'm still in touch with Jennifer, actually. More so now on maybe a friendly level, we could say. I do, collaborate with her with work-related stuff, but also she's an amazing artist, as I'm sure you've seen from her Instagram and so on. And she came to Valencina, my village, which is just outside Sevilla. She came here and she painted a mural on the wall for World Environment Day. So we have a nice mural now for World Environment Day that says "Open your eyes" or "Abre tus ojos." All about hoping that people open their eyes to certain environmental damage that they may or may not be doing. That as part of my journey, it's currently come to this area of, well, teacher training, of course, and environmentalism and sustainability and those kind of things, which has been great to share, as I say, along the way with you. And especially now with the TEFL Development Hub, which we will talk about in a while, which is something that, has really kind of, I think it's helped a lot of people and given a lot of people a new lease of life. But you also mentioned the onlineiness and the pandemic and how everything changed overnight. Now, I remember I was working for Pearson as an ELT consultant just before that, and I'd had a session over in Mallorca. I was over there training some teachers on the 11th of March, I think it was. And I was there in a hotel. This hotel had a buffet breakfast. This hotel had all of these things that, I'm not a huge fan of, but it was all there. We all knew about the pandemic. We were all perfectly aware of it. We'd all heard of it. It was all over the news. I flew back. There was nobody wearing any masks in the airport. There was no issues with that. I got back, and 2 days later, everything closed, everything stopped. And it was the thing that you mentioned there. We went from one day to the next of, okay, we're not doing it. We're teaching normally, we're online. And this is something that has amazed me about teachers and this development that we're talking about. It was suddenly, we all had to change. We all had to then go online and do this thing that isn't the same. It isn't the same as teaching in a classroom. In fact, it's very, 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 very different to teaching in a classroom. And I was lucky to have had some experience with it. And I worked on a few different ideas, and I've done a few talks at conferences about teaching online. And then, we kind of went into, and then in September, we kind of were rushed into hybrid as well. Now, again, it's something I'd done and I'd planned for and I knew about. So as a teacher trainer, I was ready for it, but a lot of teachers weren't ready for it. And it was met with a lot of, I'm not going to say anger, but maybe angst, because teachers didn't know how to do it. And it was, the way I see it is, well, you can swim and you can catch, so you must be really good at water polo. Like, you can teach in a classroom, you can teach online, so you must be good at hybrid. Like, it's, the three disciplines are so very different and they're so challenging. And I was just lucky that my hybrid class was was my own hybrid class. You know, the classes I teach, I have one face-to-face class, one online class, and one hybrid class. But these are all volunteer classes, and I've been lucky enough to, I'm not going to say handpick the students, but these are students that I'd like to teach, and it's really useful for me with my teacher training and my ideas. So my hybrid classes were wonderful. They were lovely. I had the dream class. Everybody wanted to learn. They were ready to take their turns. Everything was hunky dory, as you might say. But I know that for a lot of people it wasn't, and I think that was down a lot to, like with online training, was lack of institutional training, perhaps, and then maybe even lack of interest on some teachers' parts, because in TEFL we really do have a lot of kind of different types of teachers, don't we? What sort of teachers have you come across over the years? Let's say since you started at Active Language, since you've been kind of overseeing teachers, what are the different types of teachers you've come across?
Oh, I think it's such an interesting question about the types of people. I think we all have, we've shared a little bit, or I've shared a lot of my teaching story, and you've shared bits of yours as well. I think we've all got our own teaching story, our own teaching journey. There's no sort of set path. And I think that different people come into the profession for all sorts of different reasons, for short-term things or long-term things. There's all sorts of different ways of thinking about it. Just to come back a little bit, I will talk about that, but just to come back a little bit to the hybrid online sense as well. I mean, at the same time, there was a sense of protecting people's livelihoods, protecting this, and allowing students to continue to reach their goals and to continue to evolve in some way. And yeah, there was a lot of fear. Angst is a good word. Angst is a great word you used earlier. And I think that sort of reflected, there was as many different responses from the teaching community as there were types of teachers as well. Some people just went, okay, let's get into it, let's get on with it. And other people were more reticent, thinking, is this okay? Is it not? And again, all of that was set against a backdrop of significant fear. Am I going to get ill? Are my family going to get ill? Are people I know, are we going to be okay? Are we going to be okay financially? Not to mention any sort of concern about domestic violence issues and mental health, etc., etc. So I think yeah, we all approach these things in a different way and with a different mindset. And as I said, there's many different reactions and responses as there are types of teachers. Because we're involved in teacher training, here at Active Language, we do two things. We run teacher training courses, especially the Trinity Cert TESOL, and we run a language centre where children and adults come after school or after work to learn English. So yeah, I've seen lots of different people through the years. Some people come to the courses to do a Trinity Cert TESOL or other TEFL courses just out of university. They're thinking, what am I going to do next? This forms part of their gap year. Other people are, you always meet people who are running away from certain bits of their lives and want a fresh start, a new start, somewhere different. Other people, early retirement. Here in Spain, for example, we have people who retire early. We're in Cadiz, so we're not really on the Costas, sort of Malaga way, but not a million miles away. People here who've retired early and want to do something else. It's always a life-changing moment for people. Other people retrain from being mainstream teachers to being ELT teachers. And so we've had people with PGCEs, with lots of experience teaching other subjects, as well as a particularly notable deputy head teacher in a primary school. And all of these people, so they learn so much on these courses. It's interesting, language teaching is different to other teaching. So there's all sorts of varieties of people who come into teaching. Our aim is to help people understand what good practice is. I used to use the term best practice. I've recently learned from a colleague that we shouldn't use the expression best practice, because who's to say what's best? But we should always talk about good practice. We can always agree what is good practice. Of course, on these courses, traditionally, they're 4 or 5 weeks long. We run our intensive course over 5 weeks. And someone who's done a PGCE could look at it and think, crikey, that's not a course. That's just sort of, can't compare. And of course, it's not the same. A lot is crammed into these courses. The two big ones and the two most well-known ones are the CELTA from Cambridge and the Trinity Cert TESOL. And these courses, they have a great depth within them, loads of teaching practice. By the end of the course, teachers understand what they're doing and why they're doing it. They can plan, prepare, deliver, and reflect on a decent lesson. We try and instill certain values. And I think that we've talked about this before, Harry, the idea of a backpacker teacher, that idea of the stereotype of someone who doesn't care. Well, that for me is the red line. If people don't care about their students, if they're not respecting their students, that is the problem. You can have as much or as little training, but the key is to respect your students. And then from then on, if you do a decent training course, that will give you that structure, and then see where it takes you. Go on your teaching journey. I think one of the things I love about doing the courses is that it does take people to all sorts of interesting places, and it's the beginning of their teaching journey, which is a beautiful place to be.
Yeah, I really love what you pointed out there about the backpacker teacher. I think it's one of the things that teachers like yourself and teachers like me, and teachers who have been in the game a long time, basically. I mean, I've been teaching now for almost 15 years. So, I know that's not nearly as long as a lot of other people. But it's what kind of irks us, I guess, by the fact when other teachers, mainstream teachers have been, they've obviously been through university, they've done their PGC and stuff, and they kind of look across at TEFL teachers, often not as real teachers, let's say. You're not a real teacher, you're a TEFL teacher. Now, I'll accept in my first maybe 3 or 4 years of being a TEFL teacher, while I was a kind of backpacker teacher, I lived in Vietnam, I lived in Brazil, I lived in Australia, I lived in China. I spent time, traveling the world teaching. Maybe at that point, teaching wasn't necessarily my vocation. It was my means to an end. But within that, I cared about my students. That was the key, as you mentioned. I did care about my students. I did care about going in there and doing things properly. It was a means to travel. It was a means to get around the world. And I learned a lot about teaching in that time while I was going around. I didn't do an awful lot of, focused training, because, I was in one place for a couple of months, and I'd go to another place for a few months, and then I'd be in a place for maybe 6 months. And, various different places have different levels of training. They want you for different reasons. For example, when I taught in China, I was put in front of a class of 60 students, and they say, we just want you to give them confidence in speaking. I was like, okay, how do I give confidence to a class of 60 highly disciplined students who don't want to speak over their teacher, who don't want to shout, how do I just give them confidence? So there were those learning moments, there were those developmental moments. But for me, I didn't feel necessarily like and I'm going to say it with inverted commas that nobody can see, a real teacher, until I got to Spain, and I kind of realized that, what, I'm pretty good at this. I kind of like this, and I can make a difference doing this. It's not going to make a difference to my bank account, because, as you mentioned before, it is not a well-paid job. It is not a well-paid job, and I think that's the reason why some of these kind of backpacker teachers do have that resentment towards it. They come in, maybe they've come from the UK or something like that, where it's more difficult at the moment, obviously. But they've worked, they've done their degree, they've worked for maybe a year. I remember I worked as a marketing assistant for a year, and I was on almost 30 grand. I was on quite big money for somebody who was 23 years old. And then, I went traveling, and while I was traveling, the pay was fairly decent. And then I got here and the pay was not fantastic. It was not a huge amount of money at the end of the month. I mean, living costs here are pretty low. You can for those people who are listening in the UK, you can get a beer for about €1.20 here. If you drink beer, you can get a coffee for €1 as well. I don't drink beer, but I do drink coffee. So the living costs are so much lower. And I think the issue a lot of people have with it is that entitlement of, well, I'm working, so I should be getting paid more. So they then go ahead and do the bare minimum. They go in and they're like, well, I've got 21 teaching hours. I'll do those 21 teaching hours. And then when it comes to writing reports, well, I'll complain about that because I have to do a bit of work over the weekend. And this is the image that a minority of teachers, but they give off to people outside the TEFL world, and people see that and think, that's what TEFL teachers are like. They're an entitled bunch who just want to travel, they just want to get paid, they go to their classes, and they're not very happy about working from home. When I see my friends who are teachers in mainstream education, I see them being worked to the bone. They prepare for work, they prepare for class before they go in, they prepare when they get home, they get marking, they take home all of their work with them. They're the most passionate bunch of people I've ever met in my life. And I can see why that small image, that painted image of these lazy backpacker teachers can be kind of a brush to tar the rest of us with. It's a bit like, those awful people, quite a large minority, but those awful people who behaved the way they did after England lost in the Euros, which, paints, I was embarrassed to be English after that. And it paints an awful picture of everybody in England. For me, it's kind of the same with these backpacker teachers who don't really care a great deal.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying, Harry. And it's interesting. My heart feels like conflicted. In one way, I want to pour more petrol on the fire to get the thing burning a bit brighter, because there's so much that I agree with. On the other hand, I feel sort of defensive about it and feel like, actually, no, there's a lot of misconceptions to put right, and perhaps this is a chance to do it. Let's start with the former, though. I think there's so much that so annoys me about our profession. I use the word profession. Is it a profession? Is it an industry? Working as an ELT teacher, traveling, being in different countries around the world is the most spectacular job in so many ways. We're able to spend time in countries, for me now, to live in a different country, to take part in their lives, to become part of the community, to meet lots of people, to engage in them, and at the same time to be teaching English. Now, I should add here a big rider. When I teach English, it's never to further a sort of Anglo-American view of the world. I'm all about supporting local cultures through English. So, for example, I don't like teaching about a British Christmas. I want my students to learn how to talk about their own experiences in English, rather than to learn about British culture or what have you. But I think there's so many problems within it. One is the lack of regulation. Across the world, the English teaching and English learning is such a poorly regulated industry. Here in Spain, for example, it comes under a sort of umbrella term called educación no reglada, which means education without rules, effectively, which I've always thought is pretty odd. And along with that, you've got, I talked about qualifications before, but now you can get a TEFL certificate, you can look on Groupon and you can get a TEFL certificate for 50 quid. And I think, what is this? I'm quite active online, as you know, and in and out of different various social media groups and what have you. And you see people talking about it. So yeah, I spent 50 quid, 100 quid on this course. It said it was 150 hours, but don't worry, I did it in 6. I think, what is this? And these are not isolated incidents, Harry. Yeah, it makes me, as you can hear, I'm getting, it angers me because it devalues the profession. It devalues what we're doing. And it means that more people go out into different parts of the world with those attitudes without being properly trained and without having those ideas of respect for your students and respect for the profession within them. I don't care if people do it for a year or 2 or 6 months, or like you were talking about in your formative years of in terms of your teaching, not in terms of your life, Harry, but in terms of your teaching, a few months here and a few months there. There's nothing wrong with that. Go for it, fantastic. But do it with a degree of professionalism. And the same is true of language schools as well. You know, we know that throughout the world, there are language schools which are fantastic, serious, professional, dynamic, progressive places where people are really pushing the boundaries of learning and teaching and really inquiring and being extremely thoughtful, extremely critical, and really approaching things in a way that mainstream education can't, because it doesn't have the room to do it. I think part of being in this sort of private part of education, if you like, or this different sector, is that we're perhaps more able to experiment than in other parts. So yeah, it's so frustrating when language schools are poorly run, when language schools don't pay people properly, when teachers don't approach the job with a level of seriousness and professionalism that it should be given. So yeah, there's a lot to be angry about in our profession. There's a lot to fight against, and there's a lot to improve. There's talk of unionizing in certain areas here in Spain, here in Andalusia, for example. I think that would be a really interesting step forward. You know, how would a TEFL teachers trade union behave in relation to qualifications, for example? I quite enjoy sitting on the fence with these things. You know, yeah, I run a language school, I own a language school, and I'm also a teacher, and I've always been a teacher. So those things combine, I can see both sides of things. I think, like so much else, the more we can come together, you know, the teacher and the manager, and not see each other as the enemy, but see each other as colleagues and work progressively with those things, then there's a way through it. But I think that here Brexit has a role to play. I really hope that perhaps if something good can come out of the horribleness that is Brexit, then, for example, Spain, let's take the Spanish example, could say, yeah, we will recognise teachers, ELT teachers, with a Trinity Cert TESOL or a CELTA course. You know, that sort of could be prescribed, and that would create a push towards quality and towards professionalism. So yeah, there's a lot to get cross about in our profession, that's for sure.
There's another thing that's come from Brexit, in my opinion. I'm looking for silver linings in this awful rain-filled cloud, and it has it's reduced the number of people who can just pop over for a year. So what I'm hoping is it will reduce that native speakerism that we have in a lot of academies, where I understand that as an academy owner, you have to please your client, and a lot of the clients here want a native teacher to be a native speaker to be their child or their teenage or their teacher. They think maybe if they're taught by somebody who maybe doesn't have RP, or doesn't have a beautiful Boston twang, then you know, they're going to end up with an awful accent. And for some reason, there is that kind of horrible misnomer that if you're not a native teacher, then you can't be an English teacher, which I think is changing. There's a huge movement to change it, which is absolutely right, because some of the best, most qualified, wonderful teachers I've ever observed teaching were certainly not, you know, a fresh off the boat native speaker who just got their CELTA. They were well experienced, yet they were non-native speakers. But I'll tell you what, they could tell you about the third conditional an awful lot better than I could when I started teaching. I thought the third conditional, I don't know, it seemed like, you know, the next level on your air conditioning. You know, you got the first one, the fan, the second one, the cold, and the third conditional is the hot one. I had absolutely no idea about it. So again, maybe if something good can come from it, will be more opportunities are given to non-native speakers. Hopefully,
I'd like to pull you up on the word, or just to examine for a moment that word non-native speaker, right? For example, the idea, Silvana, I think, Silvana Richardson speaks very powerfully about this. Nobody in any situation defines themselves through what they're not. So I wouldn't say I'm a non-woman. I wouldn't say I'm
very true.
Non-short, non-thin. And so I think the very word, and even the word native of what? Native of where? I think we live in a world that's so different now, that's so differently connected. These concepts are wrong, and we need to. I think that one of the steps we need to take is to stop using that expression. I think we need to start referring to people who speak English as a second or third language. It's longer, yeah, but in
it's
fact,
more accurate though. That's for sure.
It's more accurate, and also we'll because it's too long, we'll stop using it and we'll start referring to each other as teachers, which, for heaven's sake, that's what we are.
That's exactly what we are.
So yeah, I mean, I'm a fully paid up member of Equal Opportunities for sure. Having said that, I also understand the resistance from our families and who come to our language schools. That's about education. That's about bringing people on the journey. That's about a confidence. It's about celebrating an internationalism on a local. I mean, my dream is to have a staff room of people from all over the world with all sorts of different accents, including, I think, really importantly in the Spanish context, including Spanish teachers, and they then are a beautiful model for our students. Look, English isn't only for people who were born in an English-speaking country. English is for everybody, is international. So if we can start breaking these things down, there is a job to do. There is from my perspective, it's one of the questions that parents always ask when they come in through the door. They don't know what questions to ask. And they think, oh, crikey, I better ask some questions. And they use the N-word, the N-word being native speaker. Are all your teachers native speakers? My answer to that is yes. All the teachers here have a native level. I don't like the word native. I want to move away from that. What that person wants to know when they come in is, tell me, are they good at speaking English? Is really what they want to know. Are they good enough? Me, as the owner, as the boss here, I can say, yeah, they're good enough. If you don't think they're good enough, you can talk to me about it. Not a problem. So yeah, there's a long way to go on that. And if anybody has had the joy of seeing Silvana Richardson speak on the issue, then yeah, I took a lot from her. I think that she's really quite amazing. And we need to stop using the word. We as an industry have created it. We used it to market ourselves for years.
Yeah.
And now we need to stop.
And now it's illegal to use the phrase, isn't it? When you're advertising a job to ask for a native speaker, you're not actually allowed to do that. But no. I still see people. I see native level, but I don't know. I think with the Common European Framework, we could surely just put in now, with a C2 level, with a C1 level of English. Surely that's sufficient.
Or C2 or whatever, or the approach that I've taken recently, because we've got a job ad out at the moment. If anybody's interested, feel free to apply. And I didn't mention it at all. Just, you don't need to mention it. I want qualifications, I want experience, I want passion. That's what I want.
And obviously, if you're going to be an English teacher, then you're going to need to be able to speak English. Like,
Absolutely.
if I went to a Spanish class, which I haven't done in a very long time, but I would hope that my Spanish teacher had a fairly decent level of Spanish, because otherwise they'd be found out pretty quickly. And Absolutely. I'd hope that their bosses had interviewed them. Not asked to see their certificate necessarily, but you interviewed them, given them a trial class, and so on and so forth, so they could see that they had the sufficient level to teach a wandering giddy how to speak Spanish. Sorry, a giddy, by the way, is a pejorative term for somebody who's from the north of Europe, used here in Spain, but it's often used with a lot of love. Certainly with the people in my village, as they point and laugh at me. That's what I tell myself anyway. This seems like a perfect moment to go off to the news. So I'm going to go off to the news, and I'm going to play our first advert as well. So we'll be back in about 6 minutes. So Simon, if you need to go and grab yourself a glass of water, maybe pop to the loo, now would be a great time to do it.
See you soon, Harry.
See you in a sec.
This is Teachers Talk Radio, and this is Teachers Talk Radio News.
This is your latest Teachers Talk Radio News with Gail Glenn. Figures released recently by the Department for Education have shown that pupils in the borough of Oldham have absence rates amongst the highest in England. Oldham Council's Managing Director of Children and Young People, Gerard Jones, is quoted as saying in an interview with the Oldham Times that the longer-term impact of COVID-19 is persistent absence and elective home education. There's a group of children that we might really struggle to ever get back into education. The Council is focusing on young people's mental health for the next academic year. Mr. Jones stated that what really helps children learn is to be happy, healthy and safe. It's not just the learning resources that we need, it's the support around children's mental health that enables them to learn. £12 million is being invested to maintain and improve Staffordshire schools. New roofs and windows will be installed, and heating systems, pipework and electrical networks will be upgraded. Jonathan Price, Staffordshire County Council's Cabinet Member for Education, said, "The quality of school buildings can help or hinder pupils' learning, and we are committed to having our children taught in the best possible environment across the county." Willowden, a subsidiary of Inspiring Scotland, is to launch a chain of outdoor nurseries in Edinburgh. The first site will have capacity for up to 24 children per day for children aged between 3 and 5. They eventually plan to operate across Scotland, including deprived communities. Chief Executive Deborah Grant said, "With funded childcare hours doubling from August, and COVID-19 continuing to impact children's health and well-being, there is growing demand for increased access to outdoor nurseries across Scotland." This has been your daily education news briefing.
Creative Resources, made for teachers by teachers. At Creative Resources, we've been rethinking what a classroom can be. We've created a huge range of more than 2,500 original and exciting resources that span across more than 15 different subject areas. Whether you're looking for primary or secondary level resources, careers options, PSHE, arts or humanities, Creative Resources have the resources for you. We offer full curriculum packages and unique, challenging escape rooms themed on topics such as Shakespeare, Tudors, and fractions. We have quizzes, task cards, Tarsier puzzles, and lots more. Better still, more than 100 resources can be accessed for free. Just visit our website www.CRE8TIVEresources.com. You can get 10% off any order you make on our website by using the discount code TTRadio. Creative Resources, made for teachers by teachers. Every teacher loves stationery, right? Imagine getting a selection of fun, beautiful and unique stationery items designed and selected especially for teachers, delivered through your door every month. You need to check out teacherslovestationery.club.
I'm always so excited when the box arrives. It's such a treat.
My Teachers Love Stationery Club box is just a little treat to myself every month.
It's always full of delightful and surprising items, including some really good quality stationery brands like Faber-Castell and Stabilo.
And because you never know what you're going to get, it makes it even more fun and special when you get it.
It feels really great to be supporting a family business that's run by real teachers. I can't help feeling like they just know what I'm going to enjoy using stationery-wise better than I do myself.
Visit teacherslovestationery.club and enter the code TTRadio when you buy your first stationery box to save £2 today. teacherslovestationery.club. Introducing the Leadership Masterclass series by Diana Osagi. Learn how to ditch your fears and develop your leadership confidence. How to deal with difficult colleagues. How to thrive when you lead in a challenging environment. And how to get colleagues to buy into your vision. Join Diana for her online leadership masterclasses starting on the 10th of July and running all the way through the summer. These sessions are the perfect way to prepare and refresh for the next academic year and beyond. Book your place at courageousleadership.co.uk/events now. The first 50 leaders to sign up get an additional free mini coaching session with Diana herself. Don't miss this. Courageous Leadership Masterclasses at courageousleadership.co.uk/events.
And welcome back, everybody. Thank you for your patience. Thanks for the news there. I hope you had time to go and get yourself a glass of water there, Simon.
Well, I was listening to the news, Harry, actually. It's not often you get to listen to teacherly news.
It really isn't, is it?
Stuff in there.
It was something that really jumped out at me was about the state of the building, for example, the how that affects learning. And I was listening to the Climate Connection on British Council the other day, and it was all about bring a plant to school day, because obviously you're cooped up in these classrooms all day, and the levels of CO2 increase, the levels of oxygen decrease. So by the end of the day, now I know in Spain here, kids stay in the same classroom all day. In the UK, they used to move around, but due to the pandemic, they've been stuck in a classroom all day. So this idea of bring a plant in, I thought was a fantastic idea. You know how much I love plants anyway. But this idea of having these in the classroom, and that just would help the atmosphere. It would increase the oxygen. It would reduce the CO2. And maybe by the end of the day, students have had their lunch. They've come back in for the last two periods. Maybe they'll be more awake and aware and ready to go. But that's just my idea.
I think it's a really interesting one, actually. It'd be interesting. One of the things they're doing is measuring CO2 levels in classrooms, right? So it'd be really interesting to do a survey with that, where there's plants in the classroom. The idea of students bringing in their own plants is a beautiful one. Although the idea of 25 to 30 plants in a classroom sounds a bit messy potentially, but
sounds like my dream.
The idea is gorgeous. I mean, in all of our classrooms, we've always got plants, big leafy ones, which the idea being that they give out them more oxygen. But it would be really interesting to do a sort of almost a sciencey type experiment to compare different classrooms, one with plants in and one without, seeing what happens with those CO2 levels. Could be really interesting.
I vote for the plants classroom.
Yeah, me too. And they just look nice as well, and they feel nice.
Yeah.
To have living things in there. For me, some people use puppets in the ELT classroom. I like to talk to the plants.
I don't answer back, that's for sure.
The other thing that struck me in there was, amongst other things, was the idea of outdoor nurseries in Scotland. Sounds a bit chilly.
Might be appropriate for the last 2 weeks of term, but before that, I'm not sure. I know for sure that if there was a Spanish kid sent over there, they wouldn't want to go outside in that kind of weather.
I think the idea is fantastic. Anyway,
definitely. I think getting out into nature is a good idea, no matter what. I mean, even if it's a bit cold, to be honest. I like the cold, and as I'm sitting here, it's lucky that this is radio and there's no camera on, because it's about 38 degrees here at the moment. It's quite warm. I've got the fan on and I'm not fully dressed. So, I don't want to paint too much of a horrible picture for everybody, but yeah, I'd love for some outdoor nursery right now in a different place. Now I'd like to go on to what's going to be our last topic of the day. And probably, I don't know, what we're both kind of, I'm not going to say we're experts in, because I don't like to refer to myself as an expert, but I know that you're definitely an expert in this, and I know you're definitely passionate about it. And that is, how do English language teachers, TEFL teachers, how do we develop? What's the best way to do it? What's your idea about that?
Oh, it's a big one, Harry. It's a big one. I too would definitely not describe myself as an expert. I'm a teacher who's developed over time and has experienced different sorts of development. I run a language school where I see development in action, and it's something that we work hard on and that we really enjoy and we really prioritise. We think it's really important here in our language school. I'm a teacher trainer as well, so I see people starting their teaching journey, and along with my great colleague and friend, my great friend and colleague, both are true, Teresa Bestwick, founder of the ELT Development Hub.
She is brilliant, by the way. She really is brilliant.
She's probably more of an expert on this than I am, to be honest, as is the Director of Teacher Training here, Danny Jones. So, I'm definitely not an expert, but I am passionate about it, yes. I think it's so interesting to think about development. Someone once said to me, there's a beautiful analogy, talking about plants again, Harry, so you'll be pleased with this.
Yes.
That developing as a teacher, we all develop as teachers. It's inevitable. I think I touched on this earlier. It's inevitable. We spend time in classrooms, therefore change happens. We can't stay the same. We're always changing. So there's always development happening. And somebody wise once said, wasn't me, somebody wise once said that it's a bit like looking after a plant. If you put a plant in the sunshine, if it needs sunshine, and you give it the light and the space, and you water it, and you probably talk to it a bit, and you allow it to flourish, and you encourage it to flourish, it will flourish. If you put a plant that needs sun in a dark, dingy corner, you ignore it, you don't talk to it, you leave it on its own, it grows up all gnarly and twisted. And I think the same is true of teachers and of teacher development. If we can put the plant in the sun, put the teacher in the sun, the teacher will grow. It doesn't need to be the sun, but you get the point.
You don't want it to be in the sun in this heat, I tell you.
If it can be in the right environment, it can flourish. If it's in the wrong environment, it won't. I think about it on two levels, really. One is about people's own development. That sense of personal development. What do I do to develop? The other thing is a more of an institutional way of thinking about it. What happens in my place of work, wherever that may be, whether it's online, in a language school, whatever, what goes on there to encourage my development? And I think there's these two things that can work together: the personal stuff along with the institutional stuff. Which way do you want to go first, Harry?
Oh, I think they're quite linked in a way. We'll go with the personal, but one thing I really loved what you said there was encourage. When you're talking about the institution, encourage people to do it. I imagine you'll touch on that a bit more in a while, but yeah, let's go with personal. Because yeah, I'd like to hear. Well, I know quite a lot about the TEFL Development Hub. I think I'm your biggest fan. I'm not sure. I'm considering getting the tattoo. That's for sure. It's something that for me it's reignited something inside me. Now, I've always been a fan of teacher training. I've always been a fan of professional development. I've always been a fan of personal development. But what this it's a constant reminder. And it's something I've not, I've been very busy. I hate to say that, and I've not been able to attend as many sessions recently as I did earlier on. But things like the coffee meetings and stuff like that, where we can all get together and have a nice chat about whatever's happening. It's things like that, and it's ways of connecting with people all across the world that. It's really re-inspired me with a lot of things, and I think off the back of. I did a session with you guys really early on in the infancy of TEFL Development Hub about zooming around, and yourself and T said you should come in and do a session about renewable English, and I was like, you know what, I should. So I prepared that session, and I did that session obviously, and I'm now preparing it for other conferences as well. So it's that it's a friendly kick up the arse. I'd like to say it's a friendly reminder. It's that nudge on to say you do need to keep developing, and here are some different ways of doing it. So let's talk about the individual first.
Brilliant. All right, well, let's talk about the hub, because it's a real passion. It's a passion project for me, for sure. It's I think I love what you said about it, the friendly kick up the bum, the constant reminder, the global nature of it as well. There's teachers, ELT professionals from all over the world. But first of all, let me sort of explain a little bit what is the TEFL Development Hub. Well, it's set up by myself and Teresa Bestwick, and the idea is that it's for all ELT professionals across the world to connect, share, and develop. Really simple concept, really simple idea. It was born just as the pandemic was gathering pace. As I said, T had been doing the sort of introductory webinars off her own bat, mightily impressive. She just learned, she picked up Zoom, she learned it, she then created some sessions on it, put it out there. So useful. Not just for teachers either. People have come from all sorts of different professions about how to use Zoom. It's got the basics about breakout rooms and the chat box, etc., etc. And then it moved on through that, and she did a whole load. And from there, the idea was born about not just putting out webinars, but creating a community, an online space, an online community for teachers, for ELT professionals to sit in. I use the term ELT professionals because it's not just teachers, of course. Within ELT, we forget there are writers, there are publishers, there are managers, there are trainers, there are teachers. There's a whole load of people working within ELT. And what we try and do is create a space for everybody, where everybody within the profession can feel welcome. It started with the webinars. I think then we added the coffee breaks. They're particularly nice. The idea there was that, that people missed through the pandemic. People missed having that contact with colleagues. Just going to a staff room and hanging out there and chatting. Now, what it's become is that we tend to hang out there and chat TEFL once every 2 weeks for an hour, for a couple of hours a day. People come and go through the sessions, and they're always fabulous, always interesting. And people have said it's just really nice to feel that staff room vibe again. And not just teachers who are working in a language school who missed the staff room, but there's a lot of people in our profession who are working on their own, freelancers who are working on their own, and actually having a space to come together in an informal way is really nice, really welcomed by people.
That's me you're speaking about right there.
You are our number one profile, Harry, so that's good. And then we thought, okay, we want to create some more specific spaces to address more specific issues. And then was born the monthly management meetups. Yeah, they all need to. What's the word? Is it
alliteration? That's the one.
Yeah, so they're all alliterative. There's tutor talking time for trainer talking time for people who are focused on training. There's the focused forum where we talk about a particular issue. And then there's a new one that's just been born called Speaker's Corner, obviously doomed to failure because of the lack of alliteration. But the idea there is that people who aren't used to speaking at conferences can just give a short burst of a presentation, an idea, something they want to share with the group, or a mini presentation, or people with experience of speaking at conferences, just to bring up an issue and create some space to talk about it. As well as that, which is fab, there is a Facebook page which I love to bits, actually. You know, so many Facebook pages, there's no depth, and it's just rubbish on there. The thing I love about the TEFL Development Hub Facebook page is that there's space for conversation. There's space for disagreement as well. Something that
I was thinking about that. I was thinking if I could, squeeze that in there. I love the disagreement side of the TEFL Development Hub because it's always respectful disagreement. There's no hatred behind any of it. Somebody doesn't agree with, the fact I'm not a huge fan of using grammar in the classroom. They'll bring their point across and I'll say, okay, that's all well and good. I'm not going to start using grammar suddenly in the classroom because of it or focusing massively on grammar. But, it's also the respectful disagreement. I absolutely love it.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I think that's so important. And that's about professionalism. And it's, people will talk about the online environments and see them, especially around social media, see them as being really destructive. I was lucky enough to be invited by Rachel Roberts, who's got a group called ELT Resourceful, Life Resourceful, I think it's called. I forget.
It is.
To her. And which is great. It's all about sustaining ourselves and developing and what have you. And there I talked about care, connection, and community. And I think that we can, if we can find the right online spaces, then that becomes part of our connection and part of our communities. Whether it's about pandemic or post-pandemic, it's about being relevant, about being a nurturing space. Comes back to that word that we've talked about already. Nurturing, a place where people can connect, share, and develop. Brilliant. Yeah, that's what that's where I want to be. And every time I'm in the hub, I come out of it with a little high. I feel like, what an hour that was. It always feels interesting. Yesterday I was in one of the monthly management meetups. There you go with alliteration again. And there were people from Spain, big Spanish presence, people from Portugal, Ireland, all over the place with different experiences and having a different perspective on things. For me, as a teacher, as a manager, as a school owner, it just refreshes me. And as a trainer as well, it refreshes me and connects. And love it.
I do. I am a big fan of the Facebook group as well, as you can obviously see by my ridiculous amount of engagement in there. And it's something that I find, as a freelancer whose work is based around social media, it's a place that I can go and feel like I'm not just wasting time. I can go in there and I can get involved in something, and I can feel like I'm developing. But it's a time when I can get away from, the drudgery of worksheet creation, or the planning of a live class, or making a PowerPoint. You know how I feel about PowerPoints.
I'm not a fan either, Harry.
No, I'm really not a fan. And this is another thing that I've kind of come to love about these online conferences, is I've found a way of not using PowerPoint, which is brilliant. And I stream my sessions instead. And I find them a lot more dynamic because you can always see everybody's face. But it's instilled a fear in me of when we go back to face-to-face conferences, I'm not going to be able to do that. I'm going to have to go back to having a PowerPoint. But again,
not necessarily.
I think
doesn't need
well,
to be
maybe not.
PowerPoint. There's all sorts of different tools and different ways of doing it. And I think it is really interesting to keep reassessing. Should we get back to
Let's get back to
professional
that.
development?
Let's do
I'm
that.
sort of aware that we're beginning to run out of time, Harry.
We are, and we have to play another a minute-long advert again shortly, within
Great.
the next 10 minutes. So you go ahead. Let's continue with professional development.
Okay, so I mean, the hub is fantastic. Of course it is. And I think there's so many ways. If I think about developing within myself, okay, let's take me out of my current environment and pop me or anyone else in an environment where they don't have the support. Perhaps you're working alone. Perhaps you're in a place that's unfriendly and doesn't have a staff-room culture. All sorts of different ways to think about this. How can we positively develop? Okay, this is interesting. There's some, I've got a million things that I could mention here. We can talk to a critical friend, having someone to talk to about it, about our ups and downs. I think one of the things about teaching is that we're so engaged in it that we really feel the ups and we really feel the downs. And human nature being what it is, we feel the downs much more intensely than the ups, always. So one of the things I like to do, if I've been teaching for example, 6 hours through the day, I like to just give it a score out of 10. How was that class for the learners? Score out of 10, each one. It's very reductionist, I'm aware of that, but it allows me then to take an average. It allows me then to say, oh, actually, yeah, that class was a 2, but that class was an 8. I'd like to use the whole scale rather than limit myself. And that way we can get a different sense of things. That along with a critical friend to talk to about stuff, I think is really important. Journaling or blogging is really, really important as well. I think that's a really interesting way to develop ourselves. There's a huge number of it. I could reel off a list, but I won't because it'll take too long. I think one thing that's interesting about journaling or blogging is about reading it back. How often do people read their journals back? And I think that actually when we do that, then we can get a different sense of things as well. It's not just a running commentary, it's a history as well. So we can look back a year, 2 years, 3 years. What was I doing? What was I writing then? Being in the classroom, of course, we develop all the time in the classroom. We can't not. And there's all different ways of doing that. Self-observation is an interesting tool, really interesting tool. Which we could fill another hour and a half talking about self-observation. So let's move on from there. Reading. There's so many things. Anything that we do, there's one of my favorite words actually is a blog roll. You know, when you've got someone's got a blog and next to it they've got a blog roll, not a bog roll, a blog roll where people can follow up on other suggested blogs to follow. You can go down that rabbit warren and explore from there. I'm a big fan of teachers' associations. I love association in general. I'm a big fan of communities. Getting involved in grassroots associations, like one we have here in the Cadiz area called Tefel del Sur, which is a teachers' association for people within the Cadiz area, for teachers within the area, or bigger organisations like TESOL Spain on a national level, or IATEFL on an international level, or the TESOL, the sort of the mothership from the US, TESOL there as well. Teachers associations can be a source of joy. Comes back to what I was saying before about finding your community, finding your place, enjoying it, experimenting with it, exploring it. And something else, just to finish off on the way that we can do it as individuals, is someone taught the other day, I think it was in the hub, about teachers creating their own mission statements. I think that's really interesting. You know, as businesses, we talk about mission statements and values and this, that, and the other. And what about teachers? You know, for teachers to have a mission, a vision, and a set of values that they adhere to, of course, these are going to change over time. They do, like any business organization as well. Those things need to be agile to some extent. But I think that's a really interesting concept.
Absolutely. I think I love the thing about communities as well. And all of these communities that you mentioned, they all have the kind of opportunity for professional development through their conferences quite often. Now, I'm not going to start on conferences now because, as I say, there's a few minutes until I have to put the advert on, and then just a few minutes after that until we're going to shoot off. So I'm going to play the advert now, and then in a minute, if we can talk about institutional professional development.
Righto.
If that's okay. Now I'm just going to get back in here, and here we go. Let's have this. We'll be back in 1 minute, everybody.
Every teacher loves stationery, right? Imagine getting a selection of fun, beautiful and unique stationery items designed and selected especially for teachers, delivered through your door every month. You need to check out teacherslovestationery.club.
I'm always so excited when the box arrives. It's such a treat.
My Teachers Love Stationery Club box is just a little treat to myself every month.
It's always full of delightful and surprising items, including some really good quality stationery brands like Faber-Castell and Stabilo.
And because you never know what you're going to get, it makes it even more fun and special when you get it.
It feels really great to be supporting a family business that's run by real teachers. I can't help feeling like they just know what I'm going to enjoy using stationery-wise better than I do myself.
Visit teacherslovestationery.club and enter the code TTRadio when you buy your first stationery box to save £2 today. teacherslovestationery.club.
I have to admit, I genuinely do love stationery.
I've never been a lover of stationery.
I
Like
see.
Pencil and a pen is all I need.
Oh, I really love it. It's something that I've had to cut back on over the years. So yeah, I do think it's great. So, institutional professional development. Now, this is something you must be an expert in.
Yet again. I think there's a UB40 quote about the more I know, the less I know, or something. The more I learn, the less I know, etc., etc. So certainly, I don't think of myself as an expert. I am, again, passionate about it, and I think there's so many different ways to think about it. I come from a tradition of weekly teachers meetings. That's what I grew up with in terms of my professional development, where all the teachers got together in a room. We talked about something that was decided by our teacher trainer. We engaged in it, we did it, and we got better at that element. And I think that was a fabulous way for me as an inexperienced teacher to continue to develop post cert. I think it's really important to do that. You know, that's just a starting point. So that was great, but it sort of doesn't work for us anymore in that sort of way. So, you know, here what we've done is move through a phase, and we've ended up. Well, we went through a phase, and it was great having teachers meetings when everybody was together, professional development meetings, talking about issues, being on the same page, seeing colleagues, developing that sense of team. People would bring cakes and sandwiches, and it got a bit out of hand at one point when people were bringing soups and all sorts of things. But I think that teachers development meetings can be a wonderful thing. But there's also, we've moved then from that through a phase where we were looking at choice, where we kept the idea. So we looked at threads. We have a staff of at that point of about maybe 20 of us, and we had 3 different threads where people could choose. It might have been technology, teaching young learners and exam preparation, for example. And we'd start with some issues and people would think about it in their own ways. And then they'd come together as a group and then we'd present it all together to the rest of the group. That worked okay. But then through pandemic, we've emerged into a space of deeply personalized professional development. So this is that somebody says, oh, actually, I want to do a diploma. Great, fantastic. How can we help you with that? Someone else says, actually, at the moment, I'm rebuilding my flat. I've just moved into a new flat and I'm rebuilding it. So I don't want anything to do with professional development. I remember being at a teaching conference, a director of studies conference, and someone said, if a teacher doesn't want to develop, I don't want them in my school. And I believe he was talking about this sort of idea of really directed professional development, directed by the school, this idea of top down. I remember thinking, yeah, but if that person's a great teacher, but they're not in that development stage, again, I'm using unseen quotation marks, then I don't, they're valuable resources. I think that we move through different phases when we're more or less engaged in those things. So yeah, I think there's a sense there around what can the school do, teacher development meetings, professional development threads, personalized approaches. That's one thing. I think then we get into the whole thing about teams, about building a sense of team, which I think is really important. How do we do that when people are working, even if they're working in the same building? We're much more isolated than we've ever been before. We're encouraged not to spend time in the classroom, in the staff room, not the classroom. That's a good place for us to be. But we don't want to linger. We don't want to chat. We've got to keep our masks on if we're lucky enough to be face to face. If we're teaching hybrid, how do we see people? How do we do that? So I think that asks some really interesting questions. Myself as a manager, I believe in a personal connection. So the manager with the teacher, and then fostering the group communication as well. If we've got decent communication and different ways of working together, then we can talk about the good stuff as well as the difficult stuff when they come along. Ideas around mentoring, I think, are really interesting as well. About how we can help newer teachers, newer colleagues, people who are newer to the profession or newer to the school, perhaps. With what's what. The word encourage, I think, is a really important one. Do we oblige? Do we encourage? Do we force? How do we approach professional development as an institution?
I really think that's vital, because I remember in my early days of going to training sessions. So when I got to Spain, basically, it was, where you're contracted to that hour of going to that meeting, so you have to go. So, that's immediately put you on edge of, well, I don't really want to go. I'm at the time, I don't know, 26-year-old person who's, just moved here. I just had a new girlfriend at the time. She's now my wife, and equally as incredible now as she was then. But yeah, it was not the thing I'd want to do on a Friday morning. I'd want to go out on a Thursday, enjoy myself, and then not go in and do that on a Friday morning. But that was, what we were obliged to do. So it kind of got my back up immediately. So even if it was content that was going to be useful to me, even if it was professional development that was going to be great, I'd kind of be looking at it as in, I don't want to be here, so I'm not going to listen. And I think it does need to be bottom up. It does need to come from the teachers, and it does need to be encouraged to come along, and not necessarily a weekly meeting, because that's also really hard for the trainer to always come up with something new.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely true. That idea about I don't like the expressions top down and bottom up. They're easy to use, but it should be teacher led. I think that's clear. The teachers, the role. What's the role of the manager? This is questions around leadership as well. What's the role of the manager? The role of the manager is to serve. I really like the idea of the servant leader, where the role of the manager is to serve the teachers. How can I help you? That should be our first question. as trainers for in a CPD situation. What do you want? What do you need? Just like our students, though, teachers sometimes know what they want, sometimes know what they need. So it's a sort of interesting balance with these things as well, about how we move these things forward. The predominant voice should be the teacher. The more power any given professional has around their own development, I believe the more they will engage with it. And if they choose not to, if they're still doing a good job in the classroom, as I said, there's a million ways for us to develop as individuals. It's not, okay, this is the only way. And I think that perhaps from an institutional level, if we can acknowledge what our colleagues are doing outside of our environment, which could involve the TEFL Development Hub, which has nothing to do with the school as such, then I think that's really interesting. In the same way that we need to value for our students what they're doing outside of the lessons, and I think that's so important. If students are making English part of their lives, if teachers are making teaching part of their lives outside of the classroom, they're thinking about it, if they're engaging in it, in whatever way, there needs to be a space for that to be reflected. That's an interesting way to think about it moving forward.
Definitely. And again, going back to the encouragement, and you mentioned that often teachers don't really know what they want. So the encouragement and the choice, having the choice out there and putting that across to teachers and saying, okay, maybe this week we're not going to have a teachers meeting, but next week we are going to have a teachers meeting. It'd be great if you come along. Which of these 5 subjects? And it's something we do in the hub. We do. You put out in the hub that we vote for. Which thing would you like to talk about? And putting that power across, maybe I don't know what I want to talk about, but if I'm given a choice of 4 different things, then I'm definitely going to, it's going to be a lot easier for me to know what I want if I've got a few options.
And I think it's really important to add in that space to have, and anything else you want to add. I think if we've got 3 or 4, maybe 5 choices and a space to add our own, then things can open up in an interesting way. Interestingly, in the hub, very few people add ideas. I think that's true of students as well. I think it's interesting stuff.
I'm going to add one next week just to be a pain. Simon, we are rapidly approaching the end time, which here in Spain is going to be 6:30. Over there in the UK, as we know, they're on Canaries time, so it's going to be 5:30. So yeah, I'm going to say a huge thank you for coming on. It's been lovely talking to you. I know I'm going to be talking to you again, well, probably tomorrow, I think, as it is Thubs Day, as it's been named
by you.
By me, yeah. Well, we didn't have to bring that up, did we? Because on Thursday there's always something happening in the hub. So yeah, I'll be speaking to you probably tomorrow. But yeah, it's been absolutely wonderful having you on, and it's been great. It's been very eye-opening. The idea of for me the non-native idea is one that I'm really going to take away from today and work on that one and try and work
Just
into
don't use
conversation.
The word anymore. We're all teachers. Teachers. We're either
exactly.
And I think if we make it a long thing that's uncomfortable for people, then we're just going to say, "Oh, I can't be bothered with all that. I'm just going to say teacher." Yay! That's a win.
There you go. I'm going to take that. That's going to be my main takeaway. Well, it's not going to be my main takeaway. It's going to be one of my takeaways from today. So for everybody who's come in, everybody who's listened and interacted, I'd like to say a really big thank you to you. Everybody who's listening back, which I'm sure it's going to be millions of you listening back to this podcast. Thank you so much. And again, Simon, thank you very much for coming in today. But also thank you for inspiring me all those years ago and for continuing to inspire and support me every step of the journey.
Fabulous. It's been an absolute pleasure, Harry. It feels like there's so much more to talk about. We've touched on a number of things, and all of them we could talk about in much, much more depth. It's been wonderful sharing this time with you. Thanks to you for inviting me on the show.
Well, I think there's definitely going to be a re-invite, so we can talk back again in a while. Oh, somebody's asked to speak. Oh, they've removed their. Somebody asked to speak there right at the end, and then they took it away. So again, thanks very much. Thanks everybody for listening. I'm going to play us out with the closing music, and yeah, remember to stay tuned next week.
You've been listening to Teachers Talk Radio. Tune in live and listen back at ttradio.org. We look forward to hearing from you next time on Teachers Talk Radio.